Welcome back everyone. Today I'm taking a look at the newly released Fairy Tail Dungeon, a game that at first glance might look like another licensed spin-off you'd expect to see on mobile, complete with all sorts of hellish gacha systems. But if you spend even a few minutes with it, it becomes clear that this is something very different. This is a roguelike, leaning more toward roguelite, developed by Gina Labo, a solo developer who earned the opportunity to work with the Fairy Tail IP after winning a competition. And that origin story honestly explains a lot about why this game feels so refreshing. It takes familiar roguelike ideas, branching paths, deck building, permadeath, and filters them through a distinctly shonen lens. You are still doing all of the usual things, but Fairy Tail Dungeons reframes them in a way that feels more alive, more character-driven, and more inviting than the genre often is. This smart, charming reimagining is a far cry from the underwhelming big-budget RPG adaptations we usually get. And honestly, I'm kind of here for it. So, Fairy Tail Dungeons, is it any good? Before we go any further, I want to make one thing very clear. You do not need to be a Fairy Tail fan to enjoy this game. In fact, I'd argue you might even have a better experience going in blind. There are references and small nods to the manga and anime, and if you're a fan, it's nice to recognise those characters and abilities. But beyond that, the connection to the IP fades quite quickly. For me, someone who's seen some of the anime and played a few of the RPGs, the Fairy Tail branding stopped mattering after the initial intrigue. What I was left with was a simply solid roguelike experience. And very quickly, for anyone unfamiliar, Fairy Tail follows a wizarding guild and its members as they go on quests, adventures, and generally find themselves in equal parts silly and serious situations. It's a setting that naturally fits RPG mechanics. Fairy Tail Dungeons, however, begins with Natsu, the main protagonist, and Happy, his blue-winged cat companion, discovering a mysterious door hidden in the guild basement. Naturally, curiosity wins out, and they step through, only to find themselves trapped inside a massive labyrinth. In the process, Natsu gets hit with a case of the old cliché. He is stripped of all his powers. With no way to defend themselves, things look bleak, until they are rescued by another cat-like creature named Labby. When Labby reveals that their friend is missing somewhere deep within the labyrinth, Natsu and Happy decide to push forward and explore the dungeon's depths. The story is light, functional, and largely there to contextualize the gameplay, and honestly, that's all it needs to be. Now structurally, Fairy Tail Dungeons shares a lot of DNA with Slay the Spire. You move through branching paths, encounter enemies and events, upgrade your deck, and work your way toward a boss. The key difference is the presentation. Instead of abstract nodes and symbols, you explore the dungeon floor by floor. Each floor allows a limited number of room movements, represented by Labby's lantern. Every time you enter a new room, the lantern depletes, and once it runs out, the floor boss spawns. Defeat the boss, and you move on with a refreshed lantern. Lose, and it's permadeath. This system forces you to plan routes carefully, prioritizing treasure rooms, shops, and campfires. You can't return to the room you just left, and while there are some RNG events that can restore the lantern charge, they're not something you can rely on. It's a pretty simple mechanic, but it adds genuine tension and decision making to every run, and sometimes a bit of frustration. But the combat is where the game truly shines. Each turn you draw 4 cards and spend mana points to play them. You can redraw cards you don't want, plan combos, and trigger magic chains, linked cards that gain bonus effects when played in a sequence. Some chains boost damage, and others cancel enemy action, and learning when to hold for the future or use them becomes a key tactical decision. Enchantments add another layer, permanently upgrading specific cards or chains. These are earned through Lacrima, a currency gained during runs, and they play a huge role in shaping long-term builds. You then have 10 playable characters, who each have their own unique deck and playstyle that reflects their personality and abilities from the anime. Natsu specialises in heavy single-target damage, Wendy focuses on wide area attacks and evasion, Grey's damage scales with shields, and Lucy excels in debuffs and support. You unlock and power up these characters in the solo dungeons, but all of that progression feeds into the team dungeons, known as the Labyrinth Depths. Unlike Slay the Spire, where you typically control a single character, Fairy Tail Dungeons allows you to combine decks from up to 3 characters at once. This adds a huge layer of strategy, as it's no longer just about picking the strongest card. It's about building synergies across an entire team, and making sure you have the right balance of support, defense, and offense. You use the solo dungeons to build your decks, but once you enter the team dungeons, your decks are locked, meaning you won't gain new cards mid-run. Instead, the progression comes from amulets and tomes that provide buffs such as adding extra damage to a character's abilities or extra health points. If you're struggling here, the answer is usually to return to the solo dungeon, strengthen your character's remembrance tomes, and come back better prepared. It's a clean, satisfying gameplay loop. I keep getting sidetracked building attack-minded builds on every character, with the sole purpose of clearing the solo dungeon. But it took a while to realise it wasn't about completing the run. It was about creating a build to take into the team dungeons, and that's when the game really opened up for me, grinding out the solo dungeons to get the best shielding and evasion cards. The solo dungeons, sealed portal and team dungeons all feature multiple difficulty levels, represented by gold stars. To unlock each new tier, you must first complete the campaign on the previous difficulty. Each new difficulty increases enemy strength, health points, and reduces healing effectiveness over time. It also increases the lantern capacity, giving you more time to survive and create the perfect build. Mainly, it just leads you to pay more attention to the builds and routing, where you should be aiming to get to as many campfires on the map as possible, and after every boss you fight, you are also taken to a campfire screen. Here, you have 4 options. Rest to recover 30% HP, Sacrifice to remove weak cards from your deck, Enchantment to add random attributes to your cards, or Talk to Lammy to receive gifts, typically healing items or small buffs. Resting here usually feels safe, but it's often the worst option. In most cases, sacrificing bad cards or enchanting key ones will give you far more long-term survivability. Strong shields and defensive synergies will keep your HP high naturally, avoiding the need to heal in the first place. Visually, Fairy Tail Dungeons is fine. The pixel art captures the characters' personalities and animations well. The spells feel impactful and the enemies are recognisable but distinct. Unfortunately though, it does just lack a little bit of that standout polish. But then again, I am comparing this to those Square Enix HD 2D visuals, which you could argue isn't really fair given the gulf in the development team's experience and size. All in all, it looks fine and at no points detract from the overall experience. But it's difficult to avoid comparing it to so many of the great looking pixel games we've been blessed with in recent years. The soundtrack leans into whimsical, medieval inspired themes that fit the setting and adventure nicely. But there's no real standout tune or anything overly memorable. Fans should also note that there is no licensed music from the anime and there's no voice acting, and this can make things feel a little stiff at times. And I'll just add this here quickly, as it was the only other stumble I could think of, and that's the control scheme. Several buttons perform different actions depending on whether you tap them or hold them. This can feel quite unintuitive early on, especially in combat. That said, once the muscle memory kicks in, it stops being an issue. It's something you'll notice in the opening hours, but not something that holds the game back long term. One particular frustration I had was when you hold the right trigger to execute your moves, and if you accidentally hold onto it too long, it will come round to your next move and immediately skip it. User error for sure, but it was frustrating nonetheless. That said, for a solo developed indie project, it's a solid presentation, and I genuinely like the idea of letting smaller developers experiment with major IPs, instead of defaulting to safe, mediocre RPGs or beat-em-ups. So, what are we talking price-wise? It is currently priced on the eShop for £11.79. However, until January the 21st, you can pick it up for 20% off, bringing it down to a very reasonable £9.43. That's $11.19 US or $14.39 Canadian. A really good price for what you were getting.
Unfortunately, there won't be a physical edition, and there are currently no plans for a Switch 2 version either, but it runs great on the Switch, so in all honesty, I'd recommend playing this on your OLED model. But yeah, that's a price you really can't grumble at. You are guaranteed 8 hours just for the easy mode campaign, and endless hours optimization and fun when you look to complete the game fully.
So where does that leave Fairy Tale Dungeons? Honestly, it lands in a really good place. This is a confident, well-designed roguelike that understands its inspirations, borrows intelligently from games like Slay the Spire, and meaningfully expands on them with team-based deck building and long-term progression. It's by no means flawless. The visuals won't blow you away, and the lack of voice acting or licensed music may disappoint some fans, but those issues are easy to forgive when you consider the scope of the project, the size of the development team, and how well the core systems all come together. What surprised me the most is how little the game relies on the Fairy Tale name. This could have been a shallow tie-in, but instead it's a strong roguelike first and a licensed adaptation second. With the Switch updates fully addressing earlier concerns around replayability, this now feels like a complete, well-supported package. What once might have been described as an entry-level deck builder has grown into something with enough depth for both newcomers and genre veterans. If you enjoy deck builders like experimenting with builds and synergies, or want a more approachable take on roguelikes, Fairy Tale Dungeons is absolutely worth your time. It's a smaller game built on a big IP, but more importantly, is a thoughtful, creative one. So, is Fairy Tale Dungeons any good? Yeah, it's pretty damn great.